stand. I'm here with my good friend James Cooper once again. Donny, have you just given up on football now? Is it a rugby theme going on now, James?
The rugby season's back tonight, and being in Manchester, Sale are my team. I'm excited about it. They've got a guy called Manu Tuolangi playing for them, who's just like incredible. 111 kilos, 6 foot. They play at Harlequins tonight, so I'm in rugby union mode. There's no doubt about it. I'm excited about that. I can't wait for it to start.
Fair play. Don't worry, guys. You haven't tuned into the wrong show. This isn't the working out.
I can't wear a United shirt, can I? I mean, my option's slightly limited, and no one would want to see an Ipswich shirt either. So I kind of thought, let's wear the red rose and talk about rugby union.
I do like the Ipswich shirt. I did send it to you, didn't I? Saying that
it's all right. It's good. Both of them are. The home and away is good. I'm getting the home shirt. May get the away. I think blokes my age wearing kits probably is another angle altogether. But the home shirt is nice because it's like it was back in the sort of 70s or something. So I think that's probably an option.
I want to see it, man. Mr. Cooper, I don't know, 20 years not out or something. That's what I want to see. That's like. Guys, thanks for joining us. And thank you, James, for joining us as usual. It's always great to catch up. As you guys can see, we've gone straight in with the big one. You must be tired of talking about James, but I can't speak to you and not ask about Jadon Sancho. Me personally, my opinion, and it is my opinion, I just feel like we've been led down the garden path. Dortmund playing some serious games. And after the reports coming out from their side of it, he's staying. That's final. They're getting players and interviews to say how happy they are that he's staying. It's either an amazing bluff or I think it's done. Obviously, there's a hell of a long way to go. What's your thoughts on the latest in the saga?
Yeah, I mean, it's really interesting. You're right. You can see it either way. But and Dortmund are very good at what they're doing at the moment. It kind of looks as though you say, that door's shut. It's not going to happen. I'd say a couple of things on that. The first, we've got 2 more months. The second, Manchester United tend to get players that they're really, really intent on getting. I mean, we've seen over the last 2 windows, we've got Bruno, obviously, in January. He had Harry Maguire last summer, and there was lots of kind of stamping of feet about, we're not going to pay this, we're not going to pay that. And they end up paying. I think the situation is slightly different because I think money is not going to stretch in the same ways that it did last summer or at Christmas time. And I think there's also a really interesting point in the way that kind of Borussia Dortmund behave as a club. They are a platform club, if you like. They what they say to young players and agents is, come to us, we're a finishing school. What we'll do is we'll make you into a player, we'll sell you for big money, we'll make that money, but we'll also give you a platform to go somewhere much bigger. If you stop that process, if you keep players like Jadon Sancho, perhaps against their will, if they want to go to Manchester United, because I believe he wants to be a Manchester United player, then you're kind of almost spoiling what you've kind of created, because you're saying we are a finishing school, but on our own terms. And that's when the power of what they do changes a little bit. So I think there's plenty more to go in this. I described it as being like a panto with somebody the other day, and I think it is a pantomime. I think, we've seen stuff coming from both sides. The agents are involved. I think what's interesting from my reading of the situation is that he seems to be looking for an awful lot of money in terms of wages. And I think that's a really, really strange point, because I think most Manchester United fans would kind of realise and know that if you have this sort of situation, money follows you at Manchester United. If you're a success at Manchester United, they're going to pay you well. You're going to be a long-term celebrity, an icon at Manchester United. And that sort of money that you want right now will come to you naturally over the course of time. So it's an interesting one. And I think there's an awful lot of posturing. I think it's kind of who blinks first. But I'll go back to my original point. Manchester United don't tend to miss out on players that they're this intent on getting.
That is true. I mean, we have seen that in the past. Like you said, when they really go after somebody, they do make it their mission. And that was another thing I wanted to kind of, pick your brains on is, can Manchester United afford to not let this happen? You talk about the fan base really wanting this player, and more importantly to the club and the people who are behind the transfer, they want it to happen. They want the player wants to come. Would that be seen as like a massive L for Manchester United? Could they afford to do that in terms of, I don't know, the potential uproar from the fans or the lack of investment at this time in terms of how key it is for Ollie to get, Ollie wants the player, we know that. Do you think that United could dare not get this done? That's that sort of thing.
I think there's an argument to say they could wait to next year, to next summer when he's got maybe a year left, or it'll be a year plus an option, because we know about this whole thing that, he's got longer than we initially thought. I think he's a very good player. I think at 20 years old, I think he's someone who's can even progress and become something really special at Manchester United. But, I think United have other options if that doesn't happen. I think one of the problems, we haven't even mentioned COVID yet, but that situation, this environment we're in, is very different to what Manchester United and the rest of football have been in throughout transfer windows. We see Chelsea doing a bit of spending, but it's slightly different in the sense of the way they're run, and also it's kind of money that they banked up from not being able to spend. So that's put onto one side. You look at City spending and bringing a couple of players in, again, not for huge amounts of money. And then we look at this kind of situation where people are talking about £100 million, £120 million for Jadon Sancho. I don't see, and I've said that to you before, I don't see Manchester United writing a cheque that says £100 million or £120 million. So I think it has to be a kind of creative deal. And I think there's also the problem, and United fans will probably know this better than I do, that it's not just one player that Manchester United need this summer. They need two or three. They need, I think, to strengthen the centre half. I think they probably, arguably need, obviously, a right winger, and probably, if they could, stretch the money into a kind of central midfielder who might either be forward thinking or might be defensive thinking, depending on what Ollie wants from that. Because I think he really wants that kind of block in front of his back four. So, there's only so much cash, and obviously less than there has been for an awful long time. And I think stretching that to Sancho and missing out on other targets might prove to be what kind of shifts Manchester United's thinking and thought to maybe next summer. And that would suit Borussia Dortmund in many ways, because they want an auction. Their frustration is, at the moment, they've got no other fish in the water. There's one shark in the water. It's got Manchester United colours on, and no one else is getting near it. So it's a real opportunity for Manchester United. But I think they have to look at it and think, how responsibly are we going to spend our money this summer?
That was my biggest worry. I was sort of saying yesterday and talking with some fans online, sort of saying that it now looks like it's turned into, like you said, given the COVID situation, it looks like it's turned into a situation where we have to choose between one stellar signing. Because if Manchester United are to just cough up, like you said, which you don't think they would do, but let's say hypothetically they did go, Dortmund aren't going to budge, we really need this player, we think it's now or never, because it's going to be a bidding war next year, and write a cheque for £109 million now, let's just say they did, I feel like that would come at the expense of broadening the squad in terms of that quality and depth within our bench. You look at how much we struggle when we make changes to that first 11. I feel like it's almost a trade-off between expanding on the squad depth and quality or signing this one stellar player. And do you see that a bit? Is that it has to be one or the other? If Manchester United do end up signing Jadon Sancho for arguably the best part of £100 million, would we potentially not see many other incomings on top of that?
Yeah, well, as I said, I don't see it being more than kind of three players this summer. That might be different depending on what they're able to shift out in terms of some of the players that we've talked about previously. You see in this morning's papers about Andreas Pereira. I don't think he's a starting 11 Manchester United player, and there's arguments saying he's not even fit enough to get onto the bench. You look at Jesse Lingard. My thoughts on Jesse, and I'm really pleased that he scored a couple of important goals for Manchester United. But I think in the cold light of day after whatever happens in Europa League, he and Ollie sit down, they like each other, there's kind of a mutual respect there. But I think there's also the bottom line, can you give me first team football? And Ollie probably looks at him and says, I can't give you that. So I think he ends up going out the door. So I think there's interesting situations going on. I think the more go out, obviously they need to be replaced. But I don't see, sat here right now, say nothing moves. I think Manchester United want three players probably this summer, and they want Jadon Sancho to be the clearest, the pinnacle of what they're trying to do. But I think there is an element that says they're tailoring their other transfers, much as you sort of said, to allow them to get Sancho, but also to allow them to get other players. That's why I don't see a £70 million centre back arriving or an £80 million central midfielder on top of Sancho. That's why I think the Grealish thing has gone by the by, because simply the money can only stretch so many ways.
Well, away from Sancho, I'm sure we'll touch on it as a last little sort of outro thing, but away from Sancho, you brought in a player there that has been on everyone's lips, especially, just as Aston Villa managed to stay up and the asking price, etc., £80 million. If we're looking at alternatives, if the money isn't spent on Sancho, and let's say that deal does fall through, Jack Grealish, could that be resurrected if they don't manage to or have to spend money on Sancho this summer? Could we see a Grealish in instalments? Maybe could we see a Donny?
Maybe. I like the way he plays, and I can see what he offers. But I think Manchester United are blessed in the sense that they've had a season with their offensive-minded players better than they've ever thought they could have. We've seen goals, coming out of all directions from Martial and Rashford. We've got Mason Greenwood, who arguably is the most exciting young talent in English football, and lessons arguably the need even for Jadon Sancho to come. I don't think Mason's a winger, but I don't think many Manchester United fans would say it weakens them much playing Mason Greenwood on the right-hand side if Jadon Sancho doesn't come. So, I think they're blessed by that. I think there is a need to do something. I think I've said to you before, in the middle of the midfield, if Bruno or Pogba isn't working, you then look down the kind of options that you've got, and things tend to slip. That setting of the rhythm in the middle of the park, the tempo of the game seems to slip if either Bruno's not playing well or Pogba's not fit. So I think there is an argument for a third player, and maybe Grealish does that because, of course, he can play across the front three if he needs to, but can also give them some pace right in the heart of the park as well. But I think what they're trying to do is find out what's going on with Sancho first, and then making their other plans probably around that.
See, that's the balancing act, isn't it, for me? And it would be such, there's a few jokes flying around, and you know what it's like. It'd be typical Manchester United to, Jadon Sancho, Jadon Sancho, Jadon Sancho, Jadon Sancho, right up to the end, and then renewed contract for Dan James. Like, just something, people were saying that it just wouldn't surprise them. And yeah, we can have a laugh about it, but I think it's really starting to scare a lot of United fans. Or I don't want to say scare, maybe worried, becoming a bit apprehensive, because yes, it's a long transfer window, fair enough. And, you see how Chelsea are moving. Okay, Arsenal got Willian, and that's not the type of player that we want to look for in terms of what Ollie's building. But, they're making moves. Liverpool potentially going to get Thiago. You're looking at, we need to bridge that gap. And at what point will Manchester United hit that button and go, okay, Dortmund, we've waited a hell of a long time now. It's clearly not going to happen. And we're out. Shamas269 says, ask about Donny. And he says Donny, and he means Donny van der Beek. A lot of people have been asking about him. He did come out with some comments, I think it was yesterday, sort of saying if this wasn't a COVID world, I probably would have left by now. But, I will remain to see what happens, etc., etc. Could Manchester United look at that as an alternative to Jack Grealish potentially? You look at the almost half the price of what Jack Grealish would be. Very good player, done very well at Ajax. Could he be something that Manchester United are looking at?
Yeah, I think certainly the value in that is clear to see. I'm not sure you can make a case for Jack Grealish being worth £80 million anyway. I think he's a great player. I really do. But as soon as Aston Villa stayed in the Premier League, that shot up from maybe 40, 50 million to sort of 70, 80 million. And I just don't think that is sustainable. And I don't see Manchester United, if they did bail on Sancho, going all out for Jack Grealish. I don't think many Manchester United fans would perhaps see that or sympathise with that. But Van der Beek, I think, is a good player. I think he has the youth on his side, the credentials to do it. And I think Manchester United are probably at this stage still keeping all these guys almost on the end of a very long stick and saying, we're not certain what's happened at the moment. Our heads are down. We're trying to get Jadon Sancho. And I think the funny thing about it is, you look about how you persuade people. If you have to persuade people to play for Manchester United, you get Jadon Sancho in and you say, look, it's going to be Sancho, it's going to be Rashford, it's going to be Martial with Greenwood filling in any of those positions as well. It starts to become more attractive, and you say there's Bruno behind you, it's Pogba. You can see getting Jadon Sancho in maybe unlocks the idea that other players would want to come to Manchester United, simply because if Sancho sees it and sees the sort of progress that's being made, the fact they're going to be playing in the Champions League next season, then maybe it becomes more attractive for everybody else. But I think that is the priority. And I know Manchester United fans won't like me saying it, but you could kind of get away with only making one signing. I don't see it happening, and I think Manchester United needs to be stronger in the middle of the park, and I think they need some more options at centre-back, putting some pressure on Lindelof and Maguire, who just think that they walk into that Manchester United side right now. You can't have that situation. I don't think Eric Bailly is someone you can depend on. It seems that Axel Tuanzebe has his injury problems as well. My feelings on Chris Smalling. I think Chris Smalling would be a great option, but I don't see that happening either. So all those things considered, I think centre-back becomes a big priority as well.
It is really weird, because I feel like if we only do get one signing, you're right. I feel that could happen, and we might not regress. But if everybody stays fit, I don't think Sancho makes us title challengers. Like you just said there, the need for a centre back, the need for reinforcements in central midfield, attacking midfield if Bruno's not quite at it or injured. If Pogba gets an injury, I just think that squad depth, that drop off is far too big. So I think if Sancho comes, definitely makes our attack more potent, probably get more goals, create more chances. And with that being said, if everybody does stay fit, it would make us probably finish third or fourth more comfortably. But I don't see it bridging the gap with City.
I'm going to disagree with you a little bit. I don't see a title challenge next season anyway. I think we're 2 years off from that. with
Yes.
Manchester. I think they'll get closer next season. I think, if not worrying about being in the top 4 is progress, I think that's the sort of progress that we'll be looking at, and they might do something in the cup competition. Yeah, I still think, even with the strengthening that we're talking about, even if they get the 3 players in those 3 positions, I don't see them being quite good enough yet to be as good as Manchester City and Liverpool are on a consistent basis. And a lot of that comes in with momentum, with belief, but also growing up. You've got to remember, this is a pretty young squad. Another kind of year with some of these players, the likes of Brandon Williams, the likes of Mason Greenwood, and we get to see what they're really about. And I think kind of this time next year, going into season 21-22, is when this Manchester United side really starts to tick. But that's on the basis of having made those acquisitions, I think, who would have a season to bed in. And then this time next year, Ollie's telling people, look, we finished wherever we did in the top 4. We maybe won a cup competition, but we're going out now to try and get our Premier League back.
Nearly 9,000 people watching live, which is absolutely amazing. Thank you, everyone, to watching.
Get outside and watch.
Exactly. And there are a few questions here for you, James. This is from Fekret. He says, hi, James Cooper. Do you think that Ed doesn't trust the manager at the moment after we've had a spending spree on stupid sign in the last 6 years, which is when Ollie wasn't actually here, and only trying to get one at a time? If I kind of rephrase that, he's sort of saying, do you think Ed's kind of stepping, or the Manchester United, board of whoever sorts out the signings, is maybe treading carefully because of the past? You look at the last 6 years since Sir Alex has gone, last 7 years, we've had a track record of making not such good signings. Do you think there is a kind of a wariness about how we conduct our transfers?
No, I don't see it. I mean, I can understand the question. I can see where that comes from, but I think the relationship between the two men is one of mutual respect. And I think, Ollie decides what he wants. This time last year, Romelu Lukaku leaves. Whether that's right or wrong, that was a pretty brutal decision. And you've also got to look at the recruitment that he's made over the time. The likes of Maguire, the likes of Wan-Bissaka. I know Dan James is probably a work in progress, but all of those have kind of strengthened the proposition. This time last year, Manchester United were smashing the world record for a transfer fee for a central defender. So I think he is being backed. They brought the Bruno Fernandes deal forward. That was meant to be this summer. Brought it forward to January, again, because Ollie wanted it. So I think the relationship's pretty good. Now, I've got to say, yeah, the recruitment has been terrible, perhaps up until the last kind of 18 months, but I think it's going in the right direction. And you've got to say, Bruno Fernandes was the signing of the summer. I don't care what anyone says. He's a player that just makes things tick, makes things happen. I think the problem with it at the end of the season is right now he's absolutely shattered mentally and physically because of the pace, because of the sort of competition you have in the Premier League, which is different to Portugal. And I think it's almost nursing him, fingers crossed, through 2 more games that win your Europa League.
Yeah, very interesting coming up this week as well. I can't wait for that. Seville going to be a tough ask as well. But there was something about Wolves where I was just like, Wolves are just a bit of our bogey team, but Sevilla in the Europa League, they are very good, and they know what
they're doing. And even the other night, they controlled that game in a really horrible kind of sterile way, but they got their goal. And you sort of see it pointing that way. It's a real shame. I think, much like I mentioned about Bruno Fernandes there, I think Wolves ran out of gas. They played too many games, and they haven't got a big enough squad. And it's a shame. But I think United hopefully have got a little bit more nous. But having said that, of course, Sevilla have won the competition, 3 times in the last 5 years, something like that.
And that was 3 in a row at the time when they did do it, I think, yeah.
So and then they know what it takes. But I do think on a one-off situation, certainly for cup matches at the moment, I think this Manchester United squad, and I've said it before, are a good cup team.
I think we're certainly better equipped than the last time under Jose Mourinho when we played.
Yeah, no doubt about it. Yeah. Pogba was on the bench that night, wasn't he? In Sevilla, I think
Martial was as well. Honestly,
it was a lovely stadium. It was a beautiful Spanish night, and it was just a grim night as well.
I remember being high up in the gods in Sevilla Stadium, and just sort of thinking, what is going on here? And then we ended up losing as well. Please ask if Paul Pogba's contract is dependent on the Sancho deal, or will he still be happy to renew? That's a contribution from Ben, and a good question actually. How much? Yeah. How much of it does rely on that? You talk about Sancho. If he arrives, what it means for other players looking in at Manchester United, it becomes a better proposition, a more attractive. You look at the types of players: Bruno Fernandes, Martial, Rashford, Sancho, Pogba. It looks amazing on paper. So any player coming into that sort of thing, that's where I want to be. But with Paul Pogba, yes, we spoke about the COVID situation affecting his potential moves, and I don't think he'd ever come out and say, well, I was going to go to Juventus or Madrid, but COVID ruined it all. But what we do hear and what we do see is a much happier Paul Pogba, a different Manchester United that he's returned to from injury. And it's interesting how things change in a year. But in terms of his contract extension, how much of it do you think lies on the arrival of Jadon Sancho? If at all?
I don't think too much. I really don't. I think it is a happy and pleased and contented Paul Pogba. I've got to say, I don't think it's a fit Paul Pogba at the moment either. I think he's still way off being sort of 100% fit, and we might again not see that in this Europa League campaign. I think he's struggling in terms of maybe the last third of games simply because he hasn't played much football this season. I think hopefully Manchester United will have the benefit of a driving Paul Pogba next season, given a bit of a break after the Europa League, going to the next season and really start playing lots of football and games to get that kind of match fitness. Because at the moment, I don't see him. He made the impact. I thought when he came back and made that goal against Spurs, on that first game back, I thought, wow, he really looks as though he's properly fit. But I think that was just a cameo. And I think, the way he is and the way he plays the game, I think he does need some games under his belt. But in terms of a contract renewal, I think it's interesting. I think Manchester United and Ole Gunnar Solskjaer do have massive ticks across their names over what they do with Alexis Sanchez. Getting that deal done, I don't care how much it costs. If it costs 10 million, I don't think it was quite that much to do it. But to get him off the books when he's earning that sort of money, I think to answer this question in that way, I think that's going to allow them to do their housekeeping. Suddenly whatever it is, 450,000 pounds a week is back in the coffers, if you like. And I think that allows them to get some deals done. I think it allows them perhaps to renew with Dean Henderson, but I think there's then chats about what you do with him, whether you keep him at Manchester United to give De Gea some competition, or whether you say to him, right, go and play a season somewhere else and go to the Euros next summer. But I know the question's about Pogba, and I think, again, that leeway, I think, allows Manchester United to go there and say, look, we have got some money that we can do these housekeeping deals with and keep Paul Pogba. And I think, we've talked about economics with Paul Pogba, and I think economics stopped him going from Manchester United this time last year because, he's earning more money than anyone else would pay, and no one would pay 100 million for Paul Pogba. And I think it's a similar situation now, but for different reasons. And I think he probably realises that, A, he's onto a winner because he's playing with Bruno Fernandes, who makes him look even better. But also, we're still in that situation where he's not going to go and get that sort of money or anywhere else. And what he didn't probably expect, he might actually start winning things with Manchester United. Yeah,
which is what we all want to see. And to finish off on Paul Pogba, how imminent do you think a contract would be agreed, or how do you think discussions are going? Do you think they're just kind of teetering along in the background and we'll probably hear something soon, or do you just want to focus on...
I don't know. It's a difficult one. I think they have got other priorities. I think Dean Henderson is a priority. I think they've got to get that sorted and keep him happy. And I think, if that looks like another 50 grand a week in terms of wages, or 25,000 pounds a week or something like that, then that probably is a bigger sort of situation to solve. I think the Pogba thing will take care of itself. We know he's got 2 years left on his deal. I know it's a year plus an option, but it's effectively 2 years. So I think, all things being considered, Manchester United are quite calm on that. And I think it would just be interesting. They're over in this bubble in Germany, and it's, strange being in here and not being in Germany. But I'm sure those conversations are happening within the camp because they've got nothing else to talk about. So I think, Ollie's happy with him. He's happy with Ollie. Manchester United fans are more happy with Paul Pogba than they have been for years, certainly for the last couple of years. So I think that things will naturally find its course. And I wouldn't be surprised in the next few weeks that Manchester United come up with something. So I'd say the money is there for them to do what I would call this kind of housekeeping thing and keeping these deals happy and getting these guys signed up to longer deals.
Absolutely. I hope you're right on that one. It'd be good to see Pogba stay. Shaka Phillips says, JC. Can we go with that now? JC, Mr. JC. That's a YouTube name now.
Whatever you like. At least it's polite.
JC, any news on the centre-back situation and any news on the goalkeeper situation? I know we touched on Dean Henderson, so we can expand on that a bit more. Also, love the rugby talk. Rugby is back tonight.
It's back in a big way, and hopefully Sale will, because it'd be fantastic if Sale Sharks won the Premiership. It would be brilliant. It would be phenomenal, and there's a lot of good guys down there, but we're not talking about rugby, perhaps. In terms of, the goalkeeper thing's really interesting. I mean, my instincts are they go with David De Gea as number one. And I'm not saying that's my choice. I think it would be interesting. I think it would be a perfect world to have Dean Henderson and David De Gea competing for that top spot. But I think I've talked to you about it before, the development of players, and I don't think that allows Dean Henderson the chance to develop. I think what they'll try and do is negotiate a new deal with him to say, look, we'd like you to go on loan next season. We'd like to play 40, 50 games. And then this time next year, then you come back to Manchester United, perhaps having played in the Euros, and then it's a proper scrap for the number one shirt. And the trouble is, as I've said to you before, is the amount of money they're paying David De Gea.
Hell of a lot.
It's a huge sum of money. He's now the highest earner at Manchester United, and I don't think he becomes a bad goalkeeper overnight. And I know that sounds like a cliche, but some of the things that he's done in matches just haven't been acceptable. It doesn't matter what Ollie says. These are things that shouldn't be happening. You should have been in an FA Cup final this season, Manchester United. You'd never lost to Chelsea in that way.
In that way, yeah.
I think that just took all the air out of Manchester United's sails completely, because if you're one goal down, yeah, you can get it back. Suddenly you're 2-0 down in those circumstances. You think, blimey, how are we going to do this? So I think he needs to be taken out of the firing line. We've seen, of course, Romero playing in the last game in the Europa League. I wouldn't be surprised if Romero plays against Sevilla, and then if they beat Sevilla, Romero plays in the final, because I think it would be a nice thing just to keep David Gea out of the limelight, out of the spotlight, get his head right, because there's obviously something not quite right there in terms of the way he's kind of thinking and behaving and dealing with being Manchester United's number one. And Ollie says to him, like, you come back, we try and go for a Premier League title. As I say, I don't think it'll happen next season, but you're going to be the guy at the root of my defence. And I think the problem at the moment is to kind of extend that and into that kind of centre-back thing is you've got two centre-backs in Lindelof and Maguire who can walk into that first team and not worry about those spots. And that's right for the captain of Manchester United. Harry Maguire, of course, should be almost the first name on the team sheet. But there should be some pressure there. And I think the problem with perhaps Lindelof, I think, is that we'd see better from Maguire if he had better next to him. I think there's a situation at the moment where Harry Maguire is, the world's most expensive defender and everything that comes with that. But I think he looks to the side and thinks he's got a mistake in him in terms of Victor Lindelof. And I think he looks behind him and thinks, I never thought this, but David De Gea's got a mistake in him as well. So it's kind of settling that down and trying to sort that out, because I think, again, you'd see a Harry Maguire that you haven't seen yet, because I know a few Sheffield United fans, and the one thing I expected to see from Harry Maguire, bearing in mind the way he's come through there and, of course, Leicester, was goals at the other end. And all we've seen is that fantastic goal against Tranmere, which arguably perhaps was the most important goal of the season, because it's put a full stop after the Burnley game. And it was the first goal on this kind of rise, if you like, of Ole Gunnar Solskjaer's team. But we haven't seen that threat from set pieces, corners, free kicks.
Other than that, from set pieces, it just hasn't been there, has it? And it's not, I was saying in the last couple of games, it's not like it's through the want of chances. He's been getting his head on the end of things and just missing the target. So we definitely want to see an improvement on that return from Harry, surely.
Yeah, I think so. But, they need to strengthen their options there. And as I say, I don't think Bailly is someone you can say, could play you 30 or 40 games. And I think his concentration is an issue. I'd love to see Axel Tuanzebe be the answer. And I think in many ways he would. But again, he's had injury problems as well. Mengi, they talk brilliantly about. All the academy people are raving about him. He's only 19 years of age. And I think he is somebody that could really come in the next couple of years and make a statement at centre-back. But I think it needs to be someone who you can rotate. Maguire's your linchpin, but puts real pressure on Lindelof, because as much as I like him as a player and what he can do, I'm not certain he's, put it this way, I don't see Manchester United perhaps winning a Premier League title with Victor Lindelof as a centre-back partner to Harry Maguire, and I don't think that's being at all unfair, really.
Yeah, I do agree with that, for sure. Another question here from Suresh. Has any information on the director of football information we received some time ago? Personally, I don't think Ed wants to give the power away. I mean, there was loads of talk about a director of football, probably about a year ago now, maybe 9 months. It was everywhere. United looking at Van der Sar, or the sporting director from, I think it was PSG at the time, or someone else. And there was just loads of talk about it. And then it kind of just petered away. In your opinion, was that just a little bit of a media thing that was flying around, or what do you believe that it was?
No, it's interesting. And just before I answer that, it's nice seeing kind of a bit of respect for Ed Woodward as well in the questions, because 6 months ago it would have been Woodward this or Woodward that. Ed on Woodward, and I think that's quite nice. And I'm not his mouthpiece in any way, but I like the guy, and I think he's doing a good job under difficult circumstances. And some of the stuff that happened to him, which have gone over time and time again at the start of January, was just nonsense. I'm glad that as a football club, Manchester United are way away from that. I think the problem is, and I'm a big fan of kind of sporting directors and directors of football. I support a course in Manchester that does a postgraduate course for football people in sporting directors. So I'm a big believer in it being kind of the glue of a footballing organisation or a sporting organisation. It sits between a manager and the CEO and allows the whole thing to work. But that structure of a traditional kind of sporting director or director of football isn't on offer at Manchester United. You're not going to see this kind of transfer guru, recruitment guru, which is why the position hasn't been filled, because it isn't this all-seeing kind of director of football thing that's on offer. What's on offer is being part of a recruitment team. And I think that's why you've seen some of the big hitters they've talked to saying, actually, no, I want a bit more power than that, or I didn't realise it was quite being kind of part of a committee, much like perhaps Liverpool doing their transfer business. They have a transfer committee, and that's really what United are looking for. So I think someone will come into that void, but it isn't a traditional director of football like you see on the continent, where you hear them quoted, where they're almost as important as the manager themselves. That's not going to happen at Manchester United. So I think they are looking to bring somebody in, but it's bringing somebody in as part of a team rather than this kind of guru that as I say, fulfills that position that sporting directors do at clubs in the continent and some of the clubs in the British Isles, whereby he is the kind of guy that stays at the football club while the managers come and go. And United aren't offering that. So I think that's why you've seen some of these big hitters say, it's not for me for whatever reason. And I think United, the way they do their transfer business, have 2 or 3 people involved in that. And I think it's to kind of supplement that. So calling it a director of football is probably not strictly accurate. I think it's a recruitment specialist is probably what they're looking for. And at the moment, I've got to say that's kind of pending. It's, I think they've got bigger priorities than doing that. That might upset some people at Manchester United, but in terms of the fans, I mean. But I also think that Manchester United, the structure, has never had a director of football, and then making one fit because it's a trend may not be an answer either.
Yeah, so potentially they may not actually be looking at that. Philip Burtonwood says, if we want to close the gap on City and Liverpool, United have to spend. Ollie can't do his job if he hasn't got the tools.
Right. There's no doubt about that. United fans want to see big names come in. They want to see big spending, but I think we have to just be a little bit careful. Everyone would love to see these big names come in, and United have got more resources than most, but this whole COVID thing has hit them hugely. They make 5 million a game pretty much from a game at Old Trafford, and Old Trafford's been empty since March. So they've got less broadcasters' fees. They've got a little bit in terms of Champions League money coming in, but that's kind of balanced and stabilised the ship rather than it being an awful situation. Imagine if Manchester United hadn't made top 4, hadn't had Champions League football, then we might not be looking at a situation where they're trying to mount any sort of transfer activity, especially not Jadon Sancho. I mean, I know the argument that he wants Champions League football, so that guarantees it. But without that money, I don't think they would have been really, really active in the transfer window this summer. And you're seeing that reflected across the board. Manchester United are just slightly more well-resourced than other clubs in the country, but everyone's struggling at the moment. So I just, you're right to do the tools of his job, but I think even Ollie knows that money will only stretch so many ways.
Yeah, and to look to do that in this current climate would be very difficult, which was everybody's worry. Obviously, post-COVID, as we moved out of the pandemic. 10,500 people watching live, which is absolutely amazing. Smash a like on the video if you are watching. Hit the subscribe button if you are new. We've got James for another sort of 15 minutes or so. Before we go on to talk about the Europa League and what's coming up for us, and hopefully in the next couple of games as opposed to the next one game, just the outgoings. I reported yesterday evening, story sort of breaking out about Andreas Pereira. You touched on it at the top of the show. We've seen what Jesse Lingard's kind of come out and said about his season, and kind of said he wants to kind of stay and help Manchester United get back to where they were, which was kind of weird, but he's probably not going to get the game time that he's going to be looking for. Obviously, the likes of Phil Jones are still there. Smalling's come back without having to get a permanent move to Roma. Sanchez has gone. I mean, where do you see the outgoings coming from, if at all? Dalot is another player spoken about, can't make the match squad a lot of the times. Then now a report of another injury, very weird there. Where do you see the outgoings? How do you see that going?
I mean, I think you've kind of named most of the usual suspects there. I think getting rid of them is just a hard thing to do. I think, you look at someone like Phil Jones, I think who's got 3 years, I think, left on his deal from November or something like that.
How that's happened.
You can say that. I couldn't possibly comment. But in terms of that, that's the problem. These guys are owning an awful lot of Manchester United. They're Manchester United players, or even though they're not playing, and getting them to go somewhere else is difficult. I think the Jesse Lingard, I've got to say, hand on heart, I'm biased because I like the guy and I think he's a really good football player. And I've said that to you before, and I don't like the way he's been treated by some sections of the Manchester United support. However, when I say he's a good football player, it's because he has to play football matches. And I don't see that being a situation that's sustainable for him at Manchester United. But, one thing you can't deny is the reaction at Leicester when he scored the goal. That wasn't players putting it on. Players were delighted for him because of everything that he's been through. But, at 27 years old, which I can't believe, that Jesse Lingard is now 27 years old, you've got to be playing proper games. You can't be scratching around and maybe making 10 appearances a season for Manchester United. It might be, and I'm going to kind of argue with myself here, that Ollie might say to him, stay for another season, become sort of a junior Juan Mata type character, someone who can change a game, and someone who's got Champions League experience as well. So you can see the value within that. He's clearly liked. He's got a lot of friends there. But I think
Jesse at this stage.
That's the thing. I don't know, because the telltale signs. If you get Mino Raiola as your agent, it's for two reasons. It's to either get you a better deal at the club, and I don't see that happening at Manchester United at the moment. Although, if you sign Alexis Sanchez, then anything's possible for Manchester United in terms of the rules. But to be serious, you get Mino Raiola in to get you a deal somewhere else, and I think that's more likely that he goes and finds himself a club in Spain or in Italy, because I don't see a situation again where perhaps he plays against Manchester United in the Premier League. And then you look at some of the other ones. Dalot, I don't understand, because I don't think he's a bad player. He hasn't been given a run of games, and most of the games he has played, he's been played out of position, but it's not working. So if you can cash in on him and actually get some money for him, then I think that becomes something that's interesting. I think we've seen Chong; he'll go off on loan because I think he needs games. Because you've got to be able to do more than just run fast to play for Manchester United. I can run fast, but I'm not going to play for Manchester United. And he can run fast, but that's where it starts and ends.
Some may say that about Dan James.
Well, but yeah, maybe, but perhaps the argument there is you can't have two of those players then.
Yeah,
and because you've got Dan James in more recently than Tahith Chong, because you spent 15 million or so, he maybe gets a bit more leeway. But he has got Premier League goals under his belt. Not many of them, but he was the guy that kind of gave United an acceptable start to the season. We've never really seen anything like that from Tahith Chong. Again, you hope it comes, but I'll say it again because it's a funny line. You have to do more than just run fast to play for Manchester United. You really do.
Some of those conversations, honestly, I know your feelings on Chong, that's for sure. I mean, Daniel Luciano says, sorry if it's already been asked, but any idea of the amount of signings and departures this window? I can cover that one. James just wanted to get that up. I mean, James basically saying that we've always looked at sort of 2 to 3 incomings as a rough guide, especially with what's been going on with the COVID situation. But what we did discuss earlier, Daniel, is that if we do have to spend heavily on Jadon Sancho, then that could potentially be it. For this transfer window, and we'll have to see how it goes maybe in January or obviously in the next summer. In terms of the outgoings, we've just covered all of that as well. So you should have seen what we had to say about the outgoings, really, to be fair. Europa League, James. Europa League. I mean, you saw what happened with the FA Cup in terms of, I think Solskjaer was faced with a dilemma and kind of thought, I'm so scared of running these guys in my first 11 into the ground with this game, because I think we had West Ham straight after that, which was equally as important for the chase for top 4. And you spoke about how important the top 4 is. We kind of saw Solskjaer just choose. He chose. I think he chose. He chose the Premier League.
I think it was a really hard decision for him to make, by the way. I don't think it was one he enjoyed making, because I think he wanted to win a trophy, and that's why the Europa League has become so important.
Exactly.
Having the FA Cup.
And now that's in the bag in terms of Champions League football. We saw what happened after the last game, which was a pretty much nothing game. All the big guns sort of back straight in for the Copenhagen game. And it was a weird game, very weird game, because we kind of made fashion. We made enough chances to win the game 4 or 5-0, but it just didn't work out that way. But we're through. I mean, how important is it, do you think, for this crop of players and, of course, Ollie to go for this title? Yes, it's not 2 legs, and it's some people are saying if you win the Champions League or Europa under these circumstances, it isn't as glossy as it would. And I can accept some of that. There's no fans, there's no pressure of 2-legged ties. I get that. But you still want your name on that trophy at the end of it.
Yeah, I think you do. I think it's just more evidence of progress. I think, you look at it right now, there's no trophy. There's a really good run. There's, 1 defeat in 23 games, something like that. There's a 3rd place Premier League finish. There's 2 FA Cup, 2 semi-finals in domestic cup competitions. That all sounds great. You add a Europa League to it, the fact that United have only won that once before, and then suddenly it starts to kind of pick a little bit of momentum up. But I think more importantly, going into next season, you've got a set of players who've won something. And I think that kind of winning mentality is important at Manchester United. And I think that, during the kind of heady days of Sir Alex Ferguson, when you were winning things left, right and centre, I don't think there was probably enough consideration given to what that meant to be a winning camp. Because I think it was almost like this complacency that we just win Premier Leagues, we win FA Cups, we win Champions Leagues. And I think, when that hasn't happened for such a long time, I think the value of going somewhere like the Europa League this season, and I understand what you're saying about it not being 2 legs and all those things and no fans, but it's at the end of the day, there's still a trophy on offer, and it's still the same trophy. It's not half a Europa League, and from my point of view, as being the biggest trophy that Ipswich Town have won. Yeah. And their name is on that trophy, which is fantastic. That's why I love that trophy. And I remember being in the co-op in my village in Suffolk and holding that trophy and thinking, wow, Ipswich Town's name are on this trophy. Then, I think, to be entirely serious, Ole Gunnar Solskjaer expects his players to go and win that trophy. It's not an easy route to do it. If you beat Sevilla, you probably play Inter in the final, and there are enough people in that Inter team who've got a real serious beef with Manchester United.
That is, isn't it? I mean, it's funny as a United fan because when these players were kind of on their way out, or it's Lukaku, yeah, we cashed in, yeah, thank God for that. He's gone, didn't want to be. Sanchez always rinsed us for this. Oh, Ashley Young, okay, people had their reservations. He played for too long, but he was, he still was always fit and available. I respect Ashley Young. But what I'm saying is that now it's like, oh, but we could actually play them in the final.
I know, and then you add people like Eriksen in there as well. And suddenly all those, and you just know it. If it turns out to be the final, all those United fans who got sick and tired of seeing Romelu Lukaku not running for Manchester United are going to be amazed when suddenly he's breaking 10 seconds for the 100 meters every time the ball's popped up to him.
Right, listen, mate. One thing about Lukaku, I get it, what people say about a deficiency in his game, but he is a goal scorer, and in the right team he will score goals. It just didn't fit with us. But I tell you what, if you're asking me, him coming up against Victor Lindelof or Maguire, he can cause any of them problems easily. Well,
yeah, and I think we're getting ahead of ourselves in the sense that Sevilla are a really good football team, and that might cause problems. But just to kind of finish that point, I think if it does happen, then Ole kind of looks defensively, and that's probably going to be kind of Pogba and Matic, Land of the Giants type stuff in front of the back four. I would think, there's an argument even to say that he might play 5 at the back.
Yeah,
and again, it belies the problem that you haven't got, I don't think, a really good central defensive partner for Harry Maguire. Probably somebody you need to really cover the grass quicker than either him or Lindelof do.
Might go by for that game. But again, we are going ahead of ourselves. I mean, Yasha says...
he's done very well. He's reined us in.
Exactly. This is more what we need to stick to. In fact, actually, let me stop getting gassed and carried away with it. Let's stop talking about final. You're not in the final yet. Let's deal with Sevilla, because I'll tell you what, Sevilla are very good football inside, very experienced in this competition. Yasha's asked the question, are Man United underdogs versus Sevilla because of their Europa history and United's poor record versus Spanish sides?
It's a really hard one. I mean, you'd say they're underdogs based on their performance against Copenhagen, to be honest with you, which wasn't great. I mean, you're right about them sort of squandering chances and having enough chances or opportunities to make it 4 or 5-0, but there was a brittleness again at the back that I didn't like, in terms of Copenhagen coming forward and trying to score. They were certainly in that last kind of bit of extra time, in the last sort of 20 minutes of the normal time, they looked dangerous every time they countered, and that worries me. Because as you said, Flex, that was his top 11 out.
Mm.
And that's
been rested for 2 weeks.
So I think it's really close to call. I wouldn't say there's a favourite in the game. You can make an argument, as you've said there, that Sevilla, because of what they've done this competition, are favourite. They know their way around it. But Manchester United, some of those players have already won the Europa League as well. A couple of years ago in Copenhagen, in Stockholm. Sorry, not Copenhagen, in Stockholm. Okay, I'm getting all Nordic and So I think it's a really close one to call, and I think it will be very similar to the Wolves game that Sevilla played, and probably sadly rather much like the Copenhagen game that United played. I can see there may be 1 goal in it. I hope I'm wrong, but the way that Sevilla play their football, try and keep the ball, have a bit of possession, and that will suit United in many ways. The low block that everybody goes about, and Copenhagen had that really well. That probably won't be there, not to the same extent. There will be some space there. You saw with Wolves, they didn't have, I think, the speed out wide to exploit some of the spaces that were there. Jimenez looked a little bit kind of out on his own and marooned out there, and Traore sort of had fits and starts. I think United are a more compelling attacking outfit. My concern is just, as I say, some of those deficiencies at the back, and I would expect Romero to play in goal. And again, I think one of the things they'll be working on perhaps in Germany is whether it is a back 4 or it's a back 5. And I think it was difficult. It's going to sound awful, but I thought Brandon Williams looked a little bit lost against Copenhagen. It's the first time I've seen it in that situation. And again, I think they're probably going to go with him because they haven't got Luke Shaw, and that shows you. And that it's not meant to be cruel because he's only a young player, but I think he wasn't being helped out either by players tracking back. He was kind of exposed on his own, So maybe Ollie's got to look at that and think perhaps I have to play three. Maybe it's by Lindelof and Maguire with Wan-Bissaka and Williams kind of less exposed.
I agree with what you said about Williams. I would actually go as far as to say since the restart, I don't think he's been great since he kind of come back from that knock to his face. And then obviously Luke Shaw got injured, so he's had to play. He's a young player, but you're playing in the Manchester United first team, so you're never going to be exempt from criticism, are you? And I do think, he's looked a little bit exposed in some games and a little bit 1-in-4, but that's an interesting point. Would Solskjaer go with a 5 just to stop, that exposure, I suppose? Faradine says, why is Ollie always sitting down during games and not standing up and managing and screaming at players? Maybe like a Diego Simeone. But let me sort of rephrase that question or bring it into a different point. A lot of people have still questioned Solskjaer's tactics. We've got this so-called first 11 now that we've seen, but in large parts where they've looked tired, or like we saw against Copenhagen, they've had a long rest and still didn't quite look at it. They're kind of looking to it at a tactical thing. How do you see, Solskjaer's development as a manager at this level so far? You look at the achievements, great. You look at what he's done in the dressing room, great. He's rebuilding. Is it a case of looking more at those things first before you get to his management style and his tactics?
Yeah, I think he's still trying to find that management style. I think there's no doubt that he's trying to work on that. I think it's knowing the players and what they can do. And I think he's found out an awful lot about them over the last few weeks and got some great stuff out of them, as you've said there. I think tactically, there's still probably work to do. And I think he'd agree with that as well. I have to say that I thought it was a masterstroke bringing Juan Mata on.
Yeah.
And I know we discussed that the other day. I didn't see that. I thought what they needed was legs, and I thought Lingard would be perfect for that, for just taking, some of the pressure off the back four and causing problems to their defensive players. But Mata was brilliant.
He was.
And I think he deserves an awful lot of credit for making that decision in what was then, the biggest game of the season, because it might be one that leads to silverware at the end of it. So I think he's better. I can understand, fans wanting a kind of guy on the touchline bawling and shouting and like Jose does perhaps to some extent, but I'm quite enjoying it, kind of the reflective, calm way that Ollie goes about things. I can understand why people might want to see some more passion, but I think the way he behaves as a player was kind of icy cold. Everyone knows that. You watch the videos of it, and this is a guy that deals with pressure and thrives under pressure. I think as a manager, he's still trying to find that kind of similar sort of environment where he enjoys having the pressure. And I think part of the way he goes about things is just not disconnecting, but just trying to remain just a little bit dispassionate about it all. Because I think that don't worry about it in terms of passion inside the dressing room. If he needs to make a point to somebody, if he needs to praise them, if he needs to cut them down, then Ole Gunnar Solskjaer does that. I promise you that the passion will come out there. The shouting, the bawling comes out if it needs to. But most of the time, it's kind of delivered calmly. And I think, as I've said to you before, and we talked about kind of teaching and the way that kind of teachers work with their children and their pupils. A lot of these United players are the same age as some of Ollie's children, and I think people do underestimate the way he goes about things. I think he understands how this generation ticks, whether it be social media, whether it be the way they go about things, they approach things, whether it's the way they spend their money and all these sort of things. I think there's more understanding. And I think that's one of the big bits of progress behind the scenes that Manchester United have had. I think these players feel as though they've got a coach that understands them better and wants to understand them. I guess that's the key point. I think past coaches have just seen them as football players and didn't want to understand what made them tick. And it's a huge thing. You look at the Jesse Lingard situation, whether you want him playing for Manchester United or not, to turn him round so he's scoring important goals for Manchester United shows that he's good at that kind of pastoral care thing. There might be people watching this who think that's not what a football manager is about, but I think that's why you're getting more out of these players than other managers, the likes of Louis van Gaal or Jose Mourinho, have got out of them consistently.
Yeah, I agree with the man management side of it. I think Ollie's got that to a T. I think at this precise moment, you'd have to say that's probably his biggest strength, the way he interacts with the players, the way he handles the players, as opposed to maybe some tactical naivety, what we see against in the bigger games, or doing certain things at certain times? Where you think,
I think that will come. I think that will come, Flex. I really do, and I think I think there's also maybe tactical naivety amongst the players as well at this stage, because they're not used to going into these big games expected to win them. I think that's a change in dynamic in kind of the way their minds work. So I think there is some growth within this team. I think if you were to ask Ole Gunnar Solskjaer, face to face, straight hand on heart, do you think you're the manager you want to be? Yeah, I think he'd probably say no, I'm not. And he's he's quite self-effacing like that. You've not got an ego there. You've not got someone who's trying to bluff his way through it. He knows he's got to improve, and I think we are seeing that improvement. And to be honest, we sat there last summer talking about the way it was going to go this season. We never thought it would be third in the Premier League. We never thought two domestic cup semi-finals, and who knows, maybe a Europa League.
Yeah.
So the guy does deserve credit.
It really is a weird third, and my worry is that it turns into that Jose second, where do you know what I mean? I was like, look, when we got third against Leicester, I said, look, let's not moan, we're third, let's celebrate to a certain degree, but understand we need to kick on from here, and the inquest can come later. And in the last sort of couple of weeks, we've been having that inquest, and it's sort of opened up the conversation amongst Manchester United fans to go, well, actually, we got the same points as last year, but finished third and fifth, I think, respectively. And it just shows where the league is. You look at Chelsea.
Yeah, maybe, but you know my thoughts on that. You've been so privileged with everything you've won as a football club over the last sort of 30 years. Now you're getting back to actually playing nice football that people want to watch. People want to watch Manchester United because they entertain, not because they're turning on their televisions hoping that they'll lose. They're actually enjoying watching these players play. And I think what we're watching also is those players getting better. And I think that process will continue. I think we're going to see more from Bruno Fernandes, because I think he's been kind of parachuted in to be a saviour. I think next season maybe the pressure's off a little bit, and maybe he starts doing things, taking extra touch, because I think he tries to do everything too quickly because he's trying to get United on the front foot. So I don't see it as being like Jose's second finish, which of course was the greatest triumph of his career. Apparently, if you believe that, you believe anything. I think we're on a different trajectory, and that's incredible. I said, we were talking this time last season. In January, you're losing 2-0 at home to Burnley, and you couldn't see any of this. The sun's shining,
rock bottom.
10,000 people are watching, and you're smiling about Manchester United.
Yeah, when you put it like that, I suppose there is obviously a lot to smile about. Ryan Robb says United need to place the likes of Jones, Pereira, and Lingard on the transfer list to raise money for more signings. Do you see a little bit of that needing to?
Yeah, I think he's got a point. I mean, I said to you before, I think there'll be a difficult conversation between Jesse and Ollie about kind of first team opportunities, and I think that probably leads only one way, which is probably a departure. But it's probably with you see this kind of thing on mutual terms. I think there is respect there, and I think it is one of those ones where both of them might decide that for the best for Jesse, he goes and plays somewhere else. I think the problem is just selling these players. I think Manchester United would dearly like to sell Phil Jones. I think they'd probably like to sell Pereira as well, but they're not easy deals to do.
How much do you think Jesse Lingard's worth in this current climate?
It's a really good question.
Yeah.
It's a really good question, because you think
non-productive for 18 months, so that might make his stock go down. But he's been at the top level, he's been around, and he's a commodity as well. He's going to sell shirts where he goes. He's a bit of a not superstar, but he's that way inclined, isn't he?
Yeah,
so.
but I'm inclined to think though that they'll do a deal that suits everybody, if that makes sense. And that's not me fudging the answer to the question. I think I talked about the respect on all sides. It's not like we're turfing him out, saying get out the door. I think Ollie will actually take an interest in what might be right for Jesse Lingard. I think you'll get a situation where if they decide it's not going to work, he's not going to get the opportunities, he has to look elsewhere. I wouldn't be surprised if that's a conversation Ollie has with him, that's saying we'll try there or there.
Yeah,
so I don't see it being a huge cash spinner. But again, I'm not sure what he's on salary wise, but that's another chunk that they can pay somebody else that they can do more housekeeping with. Maybe give Paul Pogba an extra 50 grand, give 25 grand a week to Dean Henderson. And as I say, keep those players, keep them sweet.
Absolutely. Ben Turner says, JC, do you believe if United were to offer Dortmund 108 million spread over multiple instalments, which if it meets their demands, they would accept?
I wouldn't be surprised. I don't think we're in that territory as yet, because I think, as we said at kind of the start of things, we've got 2 more months left of the transfer window. It's almost 2 more months. And I think it's going to go on and on and on. I think it is like a pantomime. But I think if they could guarantee, if you're Manchester United offering 108 million, and Dortmund aren't thinking, wow, I'm not going to get that money. It's like dealing with a bank. So it's going to happen. So I could see something like that. And what you have there is no loss of face either in terms of what Dortmund do and say. And the interesting thing, of course, is, and we talk about semantics, and you said earlier you thought the deal might be off. Well, fair enough. If you take them at their word, all they're saying is that Sancho will be here at Dortmund next season. Well, next season starts before the Premier League starts in England, so they can have their cake and eat it a little bit. But I think, what I said on Sky last week was that this has to be creative, and I think that's the problem with the deal. It has to be creative. There will be instalments. I think there won't be a, here we give Leicester £80 million for Harry Maguire. I don't see that happening in any way, shape, or form. But I think what'll be interesting, I think where the negotiation perhaps lies, is how much Dortmund will take up front, how much will be in instalments, what there'll be in terms of buy on, sell on clauses. I think all of those come into the mix. And then if you believe what we're being told about the kind of wage demands and the agent sort of payments that they're demanding, that's where it's become more difficult. That's what has got Manchester United really annoyed. That you've got a situation where the player, everyone's told the player wants to come and play for Manchester United. I'm sure that's right. But I don't think you can sustain a situation where you've got a 20-year-old coming to Manchester United and being the key wage earner at Manchester United. That might happen further on down the line. 5 years down the line, Jadon Sancho might earn more at Manchester United than anybody else. But I'm not sure you can allow an Alexis Sanchez situation to happen again, where a young guy who's 20 years old walks in and suddenly is earning more than anybody else.
Do you think there's anything in the stories that were circulating that Ed Woodward actually had a deal done and dusted and agreed, and then kind of after a few days went back in and went, actually, can we do it this way or could we do it that way? And that frustrated Dortmund. I was reading a few pieces that were saying that.
I don't know is the honest truth to that. I would be surprised. If you're talking about timescales, then I think there would have been conversations probably over the last couple of years with Dortmund about the development of Jadon Sancho and the fact they want him. But I think United's kind of transfer philosophy has been set as soon as COVID started. I think they realised they had to cut their cloth accordingly. I think they're probably one regret is perhaps they didn't go in hard enough last summer and get him then, rather than worry about spending money that not they don't have, but they've got to spend more wisely than they did last summer, if that makes sense. As I said, they went to Leicester and said, here's 80 million. There's not many clubs that do that. They could have also said, here's 80 million for Jadon Sancho. Right now, I don't think anyone's going to say here's 100 million for him, not straight up front and write a check. I think it would have to be instalments. And I think it's just a really, really creative deal that needs to be done. But, for those kind of United fans who are looking for some hope and some optimism about it, we've seen these things sort of stutter before with Harry Maguire. We saw it with Bruno Fernandes. Manchester United stamping their feet over what Sporting Lisbon demanded. Both those
do it as well. Sort of say Aubameyang's not for sale, Dembele's not for sale, and
right. And I talked about that whole finishing school thing. You have to, if you're going to sell yourself as that, you've got to allow that process to happen. So I think a deal can still be done. But it's whether you get to a stage that you're doing it on the last day of the transfer window, or whether you think, with 2 weeks to go, we've got to switch to something else because this isn't working. Certainly, it's fair to say I'm less optimistic sat right here now than I was maybe 2 weeks ago about it. I think this is harder to do for a number of different reasons than I actually thought it would be.
Yeah. H Gamer said, would United not make their money back on Sancho with stuff like search shells, etc.? That I'm sure that would obviously contribute to the price.
And the other point of that, of course, it would be the number 7 shirt as well.
Yeah.
We know it's up for grabs, and that's another selling point. And I thought it was one that would work really well with him. And you'd sell a ton of those. Ronaldo's number 7 shirt was probably the best seller ever at Manchester United, and you could see
send it to you, James, so you could wear that if he signs.
Which is that?
If Sancho signs, I'll even buy you a shirt with Sancho on the back 7, and
I'll have to give it to my son. He's a United fan. So.
There you go. Daniel Luciano says, James, is it true Man United is looking at flex up front? Have you heard anything on the grapevine from behind the scenes, James? There's something like that.
If they're looking for a big man, then I think he's probably just what they're looking for. I know there'll be some argument about him maybe playing in his hat. Quite well, but he doesn't move too badly for a big guy. And certainly, but I think
Twitter, mate. There's video evidence of me scoring in the Stretford end. I have been there and done it.
I've done that too. Left foot on the Stretford end, and it was I think it was with David Gill marking me as well. That shows you how long ago it must have been.
I didn't have marking me or something, but I was playing against Parkview Son and Wes Brown, which was interesting.
No. But you're a bit like me. I mean, we talk a good game, but I think certainly from my perspective, I'm Tahith Chog number 2. I can run all day. There's no end product.
Yeah, exactly. Having said that, listen, James, we've come to the end of the show. I'm going to let you go. You've probably got some 50k run to go and do, or some crazy miles. I know.
The rugby, that's what it is. The rugby is all I'm thinking about now.
As well, exactly. Yeah. Listen, we've come to the end of the show. Thank you, everyone, for watching. Nearly 11,000 people watching live, which is absolutely astonishing. Drop a like on the video. Make sure you check out my YouTube channel as well, The Flex, over there on YouTube, and check me out across the social media platforms. And you know where to find James all the time. He's always on your telly. If you haven't seen him yet, I don't know where you've been. So keep checking Sky Sports News for the latest on Manchester United, as well as us as well, for giving you those alternative spins on everything as well. James, roll on the semi-final of the Europa League. Hopefully we get through and we can maybe catch up towards the beginning of the season or something.
It will be nice. I'm not promising it's going to be a pleasant watch against Sevilla. I think it's going to be a difficult watch again. It'll be one of those jobs, but I think they've probably just about got enough.
Gut feeling. I'm going to say we. You're not a Manchester United supporter. Are Manchester United going to win the Europa League? Gut feeling.
Yeah, I've thought it for quite a long time. But as I've spoke already, you don't want a long answer because it's the end of the show. But those Inter players who I think will get there have got a real point to prove. And that will be a game worth watching for a variety of reasons, because you're going to have Manchester United fans literally pulling their hair out about Ashley Young, about Romelu Lukaku.
All turned into amazing players for this one-off game. I'm like, where were these players?
Watch them. They won't stop running.
Oh, mate. Listen, James, take care. I'll speak to you very soon, mate.
Top stuff, Flex. Love to see you.